Hi guys, welcome back to the channel. So we're all aware of the atrocities that we're seeing going on around the world at the moment. We're all aware of the tragedies that are unfolding before our very eyes. And one thing I'm seeing is that the true colours behind certain groups like BLM, behind our institutions, our colleges, behind certain people, behind certain politicians are really being revealed. A time like this really shows you who people are. You might even learn a bit about yourself too, and that might be eye-opening. But today I want to focus on our academic institutions, because this is where we're sending our children to get educated. This is what we save up all our lives for, in the hopes of sending our children to go and get degrees. But what we're seeing now is our academic institutions have essentially turned into indoctrination camps. So where you expect people to be the smartest brains in the country, they're coming out indoctrinated. They're coming out with radical leftist ideology, most of which is illogical, most of which is very cultish. This is what we're seeing now, and this is shaping our country. This is shaping the minds of our future, essentially. So it's very, very concerning. So we've heard about Harvard University, the students who came forward protesting under the guise of pro-Palestine, but instead were celebrating the actions of Hamas. Actions that resulted in the death of children, innocent children, babies, men, women and children being dragged out of their houses, kidnapped, killed, in front of their families, all sorts of atrocities that we should all be against in any civilized society. We should all agree that it is tragic to see innocent civilians caught up in this, unsuspectingly, going to a concert, being in their house where they're supposed to be safe, and being slaughtered. We should all agree that that is tragic. And another thing they're failing to recognize is the Palestinians who are being killed as a result of the actions of Hamas. So wherever you fall on this issue, whether you believe one side is acting in self-defense, one side is predominantly the aggressors, whether you believe one side is acting justly and the other side is being unjust, wherever you fall on this issue, I would hope that any civilized person can agree that the killing of babies is wrong, that the slaughter, the massacre of innocent civilians is wrong. But what we're seeing is the unthinkable. These organizations that have been very influential in this country, organizations like BLM, coming out in support of Hamas. We saw the image they posted and then deleted, depicting a paratrooper, a nod to how Hamas made their entrance into that rave, kidnapping and killing people. We saw Harvard University, a letter was signed where students basically blamed Israel for the massacre of their own people. And again, just like how BLM deleted that post and even issued a little bit of an apology, the Harvard students are now backtracking, now that they're being threatened with being blacklisted from ever being able to get a job in the future at these, prestigious companies.
What's your take on this? Students now at Stanford, Yale, Columbia join students at Harvard supporting Hamas. Ricky, it's a terror group on the level of ISIS. It's slaughtering babies, children, senior citizens, women, entire families. What's your reaction to this?
I mean, it's horrendous to see that there are 33 student organizations at Harvard, which is arguably our most prestigious university in this country, who've said that they hold the Israeli regime entirely responsible for the unfolding violence. I mean, it's absolutely shocking to see more and more student groups piling on. And I have to say, as somebody who's a member of Gen Z, who's 23 years old, who follows a bunch of my friends on Instagram, it's shocking to see these parallel realities as I see kids that I knew in the same classrooms, half of whom are posting the images of the grotesque violence and terrorism that's taking place, and the other half of whom are posting their support for Palestine and for Hamas and for the people who have perpetrated these unthinkable crimes against civilians.
Harvard's president, Ricky, again criticized for not condemning those student groups who back Hamas. Former Treasury Secretary and former Harvard President Larry Summers says he's, quote, sickened by their silence. He feels alienated from the school. And Harvard President Claudine Gay said our students have the right to speak for themselves, but they don't represent the university. So now free speech is the excuse for not condemning?
Well, so the president did today say that they view it as terrorist atrocities. Unfortunately, I think those of us who are champions of free speech are put in often a really uncomfortable situation where it's even the most detestable speech needs to be upheld as someone's right to express it, but that does not protect them from the fact that we should all be very vociferously condemning the fact that there are 40 babies that are dead, nearly a dozen Americans, more than 1,000 civilians right now. And so that just because they do have free speech does not protect them from rightfully being condemned for standing behind a terrorist organization.
These same institutions where professors were fired for misgendering, where professors were fired for stating what a woman is, where professors were fired for not taking the jab. Now all of a sudden, they are champions of free speech. These are the same institutions who had nothing to say when Riley Gaines was ambushed and literally held against her will for hours. These same institutions were quiet. But now when it comes to their own students supporting Hamas, a terrorist organization, they don't want to intervene because of free speech.
File this under people who are allegedly so smart can be so dumb. Harvard students who signed a letter blaming Israel for the Hamas terror attacks, well, they're backtracking after more than a dozen CEOs said they're not going to hire any of them. One of the students now saying, quote, as a board member of a Harvard group that signed the statement on Israel, I think it was egregious and have resigned from my role. I am sorry for the pain this has caused. My organization did not have a formal process, and I didn't even see the statement until we had signed on. Here to react, staff writer at The Federalist, Evita Duffy Alfonso. Evita, thanks for being here. I want to focus on the kids in a moment, but let's start with the corporations. Quite a reversal from our typically woke corporations. Your thoughts?
It is. I have a lot of thoughts on this, and they're complicated because as a conservative student, right, this is exactly what corporate America does to us. There were so many kids when I was in school who were afraid to be in college Republicans pictures because they were afraid that a future employer would one day see it and then discriminate against them. So I'm hesitant to support doxing these students, but I will say that if these CEOs really wanted to help the students, they would be going after the universities who are the ones that are teaching them to behave in this way, to put out these Marxist-inspired statements in support of the Palestinians. This is exactly what they've been taught to do in school. And so they wanted to do anything, really. These CEOs would, instead of sending blind checks to the universities, they would say, we're gonna use the power of the purse to demand that these schools stop hiring exclusively Marxist professors and they stop establishing fake fields of study like CRT, which is where all of this is stemming from.
Gave a great answer when it came to what is happening in the schools. I want you to take a step back and answer what is happening in these families, because I think that's a broader issue. Why are college students in the United States of America, merely 22 years removed from 9/11, siding with terrorists in this conflict?
Yeah, so I actually don't think that it is a familial issue. I really do think that it is the fault of the universities and the indoctrination machines, right? I'm upset at the student statements for two reasons. One of them is that they claim to be in support of the Palestinians, but just like you said, nowhere do they condemn the actions of Hamas, which have unleashed hell on many innocent Palestinians. This is a terrorist group that should be really easy for the students to condemn, and they have it. And the other problem is that they're using this anti-colonialist Marxist language to falsely equate the Palestinians with BLM or with indigenous rights. This is all coming from the schools. They get Marxist-inspired classes. We have Marxist-inspired departments where they learn that everyone on earth can be split into two groups, oppressed and oppressor. And because they view the Palestinians as the oppressed, right, they excuse all kinds of violence in the name of righting that inequity. This is textbook Marxist behavior. This is coming from the universities. It's not coming from normal American families. And I think that if the CEOs really wanted to do something about it, they would use the power of the purse to make real change within the university systems.
It's very interesting how the left behave when they are confronted with the consequences of their behaviour. They backtrack. So many of us as conservatives really have to consider the fact that some of the things we've put on Twitter or X is going to affect getting a job in the future. And these are basic things. Like, this is a definition of a woman. I choose to be unvaccinated. Things as simple as that can prevent us getting a job in the future. But because we know that this is right and this is the truth, many of us are thinking of other ways to make money. We don't just backtrack at the first sign of trouble. But that's what these students have done clearly. Now, one person who surprisingly is defending these Harvard protesters is Vivek Ramaswamy. He recently said that he doesn't think they should be blacklisted from certain companies, that they're entitled to their free speech, I guess. He recently says that while he condemns what they did and what they stand for, he doesn't think that these students should be blacklisted. The Harvard student groups who co-signed the anti-Israel letter are simple fools, but it's not productive for companies to blacklist kids for being members of student groups that make dumb political statements on campus. Colleges are spaces for students to experiment with ideas that endorse boneheadedly wrong ideas. I've been as vocal as anyone in criticizing the left-wing cancel culture. See my first book, Woke Inc. But it's bad no matter who practices it. It wasn't great when people wearing Trump hats were fired from work. It wasn't great when college graduates couldn't get hired unless they signed oppressive DEI pledges. And it's not great now if companies refuse to hire kids who were part of student groups that once adopted the wrong view on Israel. This isn't a legal point, it's a cultural point. I say this as someone who vehemently disagrees with those Harvard student groups. Those calling for blacklisting students right now are responding from a place of understandable hurt, but I'm confident that in the fullness of time, they will agree with me on the wisdom of avoiding these cancel culture tactics. So let me know in the comments if you agree with Vivek there. I personally think that if it's going to be done to conservatives, if those are the rules, then it should be applied equally to both sides. So I have no sympathy for these students. And this is extreme. You're sympathizing with a terrorist organization. We would condemn anybody who supports ISIS. So why should it be different with Hamas? I personally wouldn't want someone working in my company who supports ISIS or Hamas. If we as conservatives really have to consider being cancelled for simply stating what a woman is, we really have to consider that in 2023, then the other side should also have to make considerations. But I agree with the young lady in that news segment. This is the university's fault. They created these monsters. And now the very monsters they created are now facing the consequences. So you get to Harvard, all of these prestigious universities, and you can't get a job because you're exercising what you were taught at that university. Rather than just focusing on maths, rather than just focusing on medicine or economics, whatever you went to study, you're focusing on all these political ideologies and openly declaring them for the world to see. So it's not looking good for these students, even though they've taken back what they've said. Not very principled, are they? So another woke university that's in the headlines at the moment is Columbia University, after one of their professors decided what Hamas is doing is quote unquote awesome. And he still works at this university. He hasn't been fired. They fire professors for not taking the jab, but a professor who claims what Hamas is doing is awesome gets to keep his job. A petition to oust a controversial Columbia University professor with an ugly track record against Israel has already garnered more than 20,000 signatures after he praised last week's Hamas terror attacks as awesome. And this is a history teacher who's being criticised. I wonder what sort of history he teaches if he has radical leftist ideology. Tenured politics and history teacher Joseph Massard, who was previously probed by the Ivy League school in Manhattan for alleged anti-Israel remarks in class, is under fire for condoning and supporting terrorism, according to a student who mounted a petition to have him booted. Maya Peletek, a 23-year-old junior and former student body president, rips Massad in the Change.org petition, saying he refuses to condemn Hamas for its horrific actions, instead carelessly showing support for the recognized terrorist organization. So one day after the attacks, this professor posted on a website called Electronic Intifada, praising Hamas and saying it was a stunning victory. The stunning victory of the Palestinian resistance against the cruel colonizers. Those were his words. You're going to meet people who are sympathetic towards, Palestine, and you're going to meet people who are sympathetic towards Israel. That's always going to be the case. But to support Hamas, to support what went on. Some may say there's no room for that at an American academic institution. Another thing that's concerning people is the fact that our borders are pretty much open at the moment. And while we're talking about other countries and securing other countries and their borders, who's talking about securing our borders? Especially in light of people who sympathize with certain terrorist groups, certain terrorist organizations coming into this country. So we've gone from cancelling people like Ye and almost cancelling Jamie Foxx for simply saying, beware of backstabbers, beware of friends who aren't truly friends, to now saying that it's okay if you support Hamas, it's okay if you support organizations that are on a par with ISIS because you're able to exercise your free speech. So it seems that what this country stands for, what the values of this country are gradually being blurred more and more. The lines are being blurred. That's what it seems like. So who is coming into this country and what is their belief system? Who do they sympathize with? And what's going to be the consequences of that? So let me know what you think. Thanks for watching. Take care of yourselves, and God willing, I will see you in the next video.